So what does a perfect person do with unlimited strength? They get better, and they get stronger. Mildred, Superman and the Utility of Strength. The Daily Grind, Chapter 136. Morgan woke up in an actual bed for the first time in a week, and despite the perfect warm embrace of the worn brown cloth comforter that he was wrapped in, he sat bolt upright as soon as his eyes opened. Hair that was a little too long tangled around his neck and face as he tried to remember where the hell he was. Then his eyes settled on the glowing red orb on the nightstand, casting a strangely comfortable aura of light around the room, and it all came flooding back. He'd met with someone who didn't seem entirely sane, and he'd gotten news about his mom, and then he'd gotten... not answers, really. Morgan had more questions than ever. What was this place? Who were these people? What kind of monsters were the snakes? Why did they think he was so important? And most importantly, why was everyone here so nice? Did he actually want to talk to them? He didn't need to. James had tried to make that clear, and the snake things had vanished when he'd told them that Morgan needed space. He could just leave, and a very big part of him wanted to. His chest hurt, and not just from the old bruises. She was dead. His mom was dead. Not maybe anymore, not missing, not presumed to be anything. She was gone. Her body was in the other basement. He could go see her if he wanted to. And the feeling was so painful and so hard to even touch the edges of with his thoughts. Morgan had cried himself to sleep last night, and only stopped now for lack of tears. He could leave, and forget it all, put it all behind him, just strike out with a new start at life. Or he could stay here. Multiple people had said it was okay. No one was going to kick him out. He didn't have to go back to sneaking food out of the shitty apartment he technically shared with his dad, sleeping at a friend's place or under the bleachers behind the high school, and being afraid all the time. Well, maybe he'd still be afraid. The snakes scared the shit out of him. He'd seen them around. Some of them were watching him, some of them trying very hard to pretend not to. Morgan just didn't know how everyone could be okay with the things being all over the building. They looked like monsters. They could freeze people by looking at them. They'd killed people. He'd said as much to Nate when the chef had asked if he had any questions, and the stocky, tattooed man had given him a level stare and asked back, "What do you think makes us any different?" Snakes are humans. Everything in this building was worth being nervous about. But even with all that, he could still stay here. And there was just so much to be curious about. Even if he didn't want to talk to the things that had killed his mom, he still needed to know what was going on here. The curiosity in the back of his head that never shut up, pushing him to stop being such a coward and ask a million questions about this building, these people, and his place in all of it. Morgan fully sat up, pushing the blankets away, and got dressed. His own clothes were off somewhere else, either being washed or burned, depending on if the girl he'd talked to had been joking. But there was a dresser here that was stocked with basics that he was told he was welcome to. He avoided the sundresses, though. Not his style, and they seemed somehow more personal. For all the fear and sorrow he'd spent yesterday grappling with, he felt better. Better than he had in months. He had a real answer now, not just more uncertainty. He'd been fed, more than one meal in the day even, and he'd finally gotten real sleep. James wasn't a perfect person, wasn't all-powerful, and he made some stupid decisions sometimes, but he understood one thing very closely. If you took away someone's anxieties about basic survival, food, water, warmth, shelter, it didn't take long for that person to be able to take a breather and make rational decisions without panic over where their next sandwich was coming from. Morgan took a deep breath and opened the door to the small basement room he'd been set up in. In the concrete corridor outside, lit by bluish fluorescent ceiling lights, waiting patiently between a hand truck and a sheaf of folded cardboard boxes that were left in the hall, 3 camera condos faced him. One of them larger than the others, one of them with a blue-green patterning that looked almost like a normal snake. All of them watching. Morgan paused. The snakes bowed. To him. "Oi!" A girl's voice bounced around the concrete walls. "We talked about this!" Morgan glanced to his left to see a short girl with half a head of bright blue hair stomping toward the camera condas with a furious scowl on her face. She was wearing literal wizard robes, too, and... No, wait. Morgan corrected himself. She was wearing a black bathrobe, and it looked like she'd either just awoken herself or hadn't slept at all in the last week. One of the camera condas spoke, jolting him back to the situation. "We are..." The snake looked around itself, camera eye settling on the bundle of cardboard boxes behind them. "Packing," it lied. The girl, Momo, Morgan was pretty sure her name was, stared at the three snakes, and suddenly he understood how his mom had felt every time he had lied about doing his homework in the least convincing way possible. She didn't have to speak to emit the feeling of someone crossing their arms and saying, "Really," in that dull tone that he was so familiar with. The snakes withered under the look she gave them. Something about it was just so... Morgan wanted to say human, but that word clearly wasn't as all-encompassing as he'd thought. But they were people. Kids, almost. They reminded him of the freshmen at school doing stupid shit in obvious ways and obviously getting caught. Before he knew it, he found himself grinning. "It's fine," he said, almost tripping over his words as he took the initiative in conversation for the first time in a long while. "They're not hurting anyone." Momo gave him a side glance, and he saw her silently snort a laugh as she saw the shirt he was wearing. "You sure?" Momo asked after the humor had passed. "What's so funny about my shirt?" Morgan demanded. Nothing. It's... Classic rock's great, man." Her voice started to crack with a giggle. "Come on, let's get you breakfast, then you can figure out what your day looks like." Morgan gave a confused, worried look to the camera condos, who still hadn't left and were still glancing at him when they thought he wasn't looking. The three of them took in his shirt too, but all of them put on the aura of a shrug, which was impressive without shoulders. He glanced down again at the borrowed, worn band logo that he was wearing. "What's wrong with the doors?" Morgan muttered to himself as he followed Momo, and found that he'd already made his decision without really thinking about it. "Yo, JP!" Dave called after his friend, jogging to catch up with where JP was already heading for the front door of the lair. He was panting, a little out of breath, having jogged down here from where he'd landed Pendragon on the roof after spotting JP hauling a suitcase into his car's trunk. JP glanced back and gave a crooked half grin at his friend. He was wearing a goddamn suit, some kind of tan and white creation that made him look like he was trying to join the Rat Pack, but 40 years too late. "Hey, buddy," he greeted Dave with a friendly clap on the shoulder. "What you been up to?" Lots of stuff," Dave shrugged. "Flying people around with Penn, doing some aerial reconnaissance, looking for land we might want to buy for James's city thing. Also watching The Expanse." "I hear that's fun," JP nodded sagely. "I mean, flying doesn't really get old." Dave grinned at him as JP caught up to the reply of the wrong part of the conversation and swatted at him. "Are you leaving again?" The last words were said with a little bit of unhidden disappointment. Not that Dave was ever good at, or inclined to, hide anything about how he felt, but still, even as a lot of people were settling into new roles in the Order, like the new girl who was casually slipping into the back behind where Dave was talking to his friend, some people were spending less and less time actually around. Dave was one of them, if he was being honest, but since JP was too, the two of them hadn't really gotten to hang out in a long time. "Yeah, I'm off too. Well, it's probably best if I get in the habit of keeping stuff secret." JP mockingly mournfully added the last part, flipping his collar up and turning away sadly. "Oh, get fucked," Dave told him with a bark of laughter. JP laughed back, turning back and settling down the briefcase he was carrying as he leaned against one of the chairs out in the main lobby. Yeah, but seriously, I'm investigating something. Might actually be a good idea to not spread it around too much. Heading down to Utah, looking into a cult there." "Again? Always the cults with you." "Hey, someone's got to do the intelligence work," JP said. "You want to make James a spy? Huh?" Dave thought for a second. Then his eyes widened and he shook his head rapidly. "No, I remember the time Anesh tried to run some kind of espionage RPG. James just kept breaking people's legs. It'd just be that, but he'd be frustrated and mope about breaking people's legs." "Exactly. Also, where is Anesh anyway?" JP asked, glancing around, and spotting the new girl from before, now leaving the warehouse area and sprinting back around past the elevator, down the corridor toward the dining room. Dave shrugged and sighed in equal measure. I don't know. Everyone's always gone now. I barely see you guys anymore. I miss D&D. I miss arguing about anime. You are the only one who misses the second one, JP informed him politely. Also, how can Anesh be gone all the time? I know for a fact there's 3 of him, even if one of them's out of state. He's busy with things, Dave told him honestly. I don't know. Experiments? Math, I guess? Making out with James? Please don't make me imagine that, JP grimaced. Dave spotted a weak point and pressed the attack. Oh, come on, they're our friends. They're cute. He sidled up to JP and elbowed him in the ribs. You're just mad you don't have a magical boyfriend. I am mad that I am not a magical boyfriend, JP retaliated. Watching my friends kissing is weird. It's always weird, because they always break up eventually, and then there's fewer friends. His voice dipped down into actual concern, and not just friendly mocking for a brief moment. JP didn't make friends easily. JP made contacts, business partners, dates. He made marks easily. Those didn't turn into friends. Barely ever did they turn into long-term connections. His last girlfriend was dating a snake now, which sorta hurt his sense of masculinity. Whatever, when you get back from Utah we should do a thing, Dave suggested. He gave it excited inhalation. Ooh, we should start a board game night. Oh, sorry, I'm busy. I have work that day, JP countered, picking up his briefcase and stepping back. I didn't say what? JP nodded at him. Yeah, I understand, he cut his friend off. It's just so important that somebody be out scouting any potential new threats or allies. I knew you'd get it. I didn't... Dave gave a comically annoyed shake of his head. Anyway, you should probably deal with that. Good talking to you. JP pointed over Dave's shoulder, and he turned to see a small collection of 4 or 5 new members jogging toward the warehouse, and, presumably, the roof access. Dragon, 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 Dave heard a couple of them quietly chanting as they hustled past. He sighed. I should deal with that. He turned around. You be safe. JP was gone, the front door swinging shut behind him with not a trace of the weasel left. Safe. All right, yeah. I value your friendship too, jackass. Dave rolled his eyes. Now I'm just standing here, talking to myself. James has been influencing me too much. Great, okay. In truth, Dave saw the point. It was important that they have a diplomatic wing of the Order, even though that's not at all what JP had said or implied. But you couldn't do diplomacy without knowing who the players on the board were, and making contact was kind of the most important step. Were they alone? No one knew. But being part of a secret group that most people simply wouldn't believe the truth of could feel very isolating. And really, while Dave was a bit miffed that JP had just Batman exited on him, he did understand his friend's desire to get moving. There's a whole world out there to explore. Presumably some of it would be, eventually, friendly. James had dragged a couch into the back operations area. What had used to be a warehouse was now a chaotic mess of desks and whiteboards, maps of the office dungeon, briefing spaces, a whole third of the floor space partitioned off for use fabricating the armor and weapons that was easier or more possible for them to make than to buy. Also a couch now, because James was reading, and he felt like relaxing while he did it. His office was nice and all, but it was an office. It was not a good place for careful, casual study. His office was where he had printouts of dry thesis statements on things like accounting for human needs versus technical concerns, and use of color in urban environments. Things he needed to have a grasp of, but not exactly mastery over. Here, on this couch, in this mostly dark room, where the only distraction was a group of people running toward the roof ladder yelling the word dragon over and over, was where he could read things for fun. In the past, James' idea of fun was science fiction. Today, his hobby was trying to build a science fiction future as a reality, so his idea of fun had shifted a little. He was reading a book about silly things that people took for granted in city design. It was witty, light-hearted, and made him realize that no matter what they did, they were going to get so many things wrong at some point. Not, like, oops, the building is on fire wrong, but more like not quite enough stairs wrong, or mildly inconvenient statuary wrong. The kind of wrong that one day someone would write a book about. Fun wrong. He'd had, early on, this vision for an arcology powered by magic and human compassion, some kind of singular stalwart structure towering over the landscape, a beacon for a better world that contained that world in microcosm within its walls. And as time had gone by, that vision had only gotten more ambitious, not less. More magic, more people of more species, more solutions to problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. Then, when other members of the Order had started to come around on his dreams of a mega project, they started to actually start, in a way. He had help and people to push him forward, and suddenly the project wasn't quite a dream, it was just something that they were working on. He'd had a virtual meeting earlier today with a man who ran a contractor company that mostly specialized in building sewer systems. That had been an eye-opening experience. Learning exactly how much space and effort was devoted just to pipe networks. Then, there'd been answering emails from a few freelance architects and graphic designers, answering questions about the details of the project they'd been hired for, sketching out a practical but beautiful vision for the design of some of the concourse areas. Simple stuff. Things that they weren't going to start building right now, but things that they were planning, preparing for. They would be doing this. Maybe not all at once. Maybe it would take a decade, or 5. But doing it wasn't something that was nebulous anymore. They were doing. An arcology. The term went back to the 60s when a designer had coined it as a combination of architecture and ecology, as part of a discussion of planned communities and cities that were idealized human habitats that didn't damage the environment. The vision James and the Order were working on went a step farther, working to build all of that, but also a government, a society, something that intentionally maximized human happiness. Their plan right now is to construct a self-contained, self-sufficient city, using combinations of human engineering mastery and dungeon tech exploits that would be capable of sustaining a population as proof of concept. And then, they could do it again, and better. James got lost sometimes in the scale of humanity. There were almost 9 billion people on the planet. Building something that would be good for everyone wasn't possible for him, or the Order. It might not be possible at all. The plan wasn't to pack all of mankind into arcology structures and abandon the rest of the planet. It was more to undo the damage done by suburban sprawl and heavy industrialization. To create environments that minimized waste, maximized potential, and hopefully to do it before modern humanity wrecked the natural environment beyond repair. It turned out that 9 billion humans could do a staggering amount of damage under certain conditions. Earth, at this point, was basically just a large-scale version of the tragedy of the commons. Again, the scale of a lot of problems was outside what James could easily wrap his head around for now. It was hard to see where to start on solutions. But they had to start somewhere. So, a perfect city. Or at least a better city. And in the meantime, they'd keep working to protect people, and save lives, and help where they could. "What are you reading?" Dave's voice snapped James out of his wandering thoughts. "Eh?" He looked up, eyes refocusing as he glanced down at the book propped up on his chest. "Oh, hey. I guess I'm not really reading anything. I'm half napping. The book is about default design choices. What's up? I didn't hear you come in." "Impossible. I said hi to you when I got here." "Not from the roof, you asshole. I knew you were in the building. I mean, what brings you to my reading cave?" James rolled his eyes. Dave gave a single short laugh and a smug smile, which James had to remind himself only looked smug and wasn't actually hostile. "I'm just here on response shift," he said. "And I was talking to JP. You know he's trying to spy on people?" Dave asked. James bit his tongue for a moment before answering. "Yeah, I don't know how to feel about that. I think he and Nate want to form I don't know how to phrase this, a bastards division?" James pushed himself up off the couch and leaned over the back of it while he talked. "I don't mind having some kind of intelligence happening around here. God knows I don't have that much to spare myself. But I don't want them recreating the CIA, you know? Like, my utopian future has us eventually peacefully replacing governments, not backing violent coups against them." I don't think you can do better than the government, Dave bluntly told him. Well, of course I can't, James protested. Also, hey, rude, but it's not about any one person doing better or worse. It's about building a system that's for everyone, that fixes large-scale problems instead of profiting or causing them. Fair enough, Dave said. By the way, who are the new people that just came through? James grinned and dropped back to the couch cushions before rolling off onto the floor and bouncing to his feet. The ones who just scrambled to the roof to fawn over Pendragon? He asked, rhetorically. Mars and Chavoy are engineers. Marcy is a talk therapist that'll be on site for when Lua isn't around, and is also taking a shift on response as a dispatcher. And Pete's an intern. And they just get to run around unsupervised? You aren't afraid any of them are someone else's version of JP? That's delightfully suspicious, James snorted. But yeah, I'll admit it, I'm kind of worried about that. Especially now that you said it out loud and put that evil into the world. But we need more people, and we need to grow. And we're running background checks and calling references and then going one step farther and doing a little digging. And we'll be careful. You know, not start people off by handing them a skulljack and a gun and telling them to go nuts, right? James, you literally did that with Virgil. First off, Virgil was awesome. Great. Virgil was very proficient at... You can just say he was a dick. He was great, though, James said with a soft smile, and he and Dave let the words hang for a moment as they remembered their fallen comrade. But seriously, I still don't know how he convinced Neil to give him a skulljack on day one, but it turned out to be the right call, and for all that he bulldozed his way through social situations, he was kind of a good person. So yeah, I wouldn't mind if maybe we had a few people who we over-trusted and it ended up paying off. Dave didn't look convinced. The opposite, if anything. What if they betray us? Or worse, just take the power we hand out and start using it for evil? Evil's kind of a vaguely defined thing, but I get what you mean, James nodded. I mean, what do you want? Tracking chips in every member of the Order? Okay. James coughed a little bit, dropping the book he was idly spinning in his hands back onto the couch. No. No, we won't be doing that. For one thing, it's a huge security risk. I'm sure research could figure something out. Get the new people to work on it. The new people that you want to put tracking chips in? Yeah. Dave, no. James pinched the bridge of his nose. Look, I get that there's a risk, but we have security protocols. We're getting better about this, and at the end of the day, trusting people is the only way we get the world we want. I'm sure some people are going to lie to us, try to screw us over, backstab us, whatever. I'm also sure they'll be able to do it a lot easier if we already don't trust each other. Dave thought about that for a second and then shrugged. Okay, I get that. So no tracking chips? Dave, do you really want the Order knowing every time you use the bathroom? James demanded slowly. I've changed my mind about the tracking chips, Dave conceded. Morgan was having breakfast with a snake. It was a bizarre experience. There were a few other people at different tables in the cafeteria, but none of them bothered him. There were a lot of the Camerconda things around this building, Morgan was noticing, and all of them were always looking at him when they thought he didn't notice. And when he came out of the kitchen, having been exiled by the chef that was seemingly omnipresent in his stained apron and gruff expression, he'd seen one of the Camercondas sitting and gently picking at a plate of carrots. So, swallowing the ball of nerves in his throat, Morgan had sat down across from him, her, it, whatever the snake was. A pile of eggs and toast had joined the stack of carrots, and Morgan noticed that the Camerconda had a tablet on the table too that it was flicking with its tongue to scroll through text on. It had glanced up at him, done a slight double take, and then given a greeting in halting digital English. Morgan had said hi back, and then they'd settled into uncomfortable silence as they'd eaten. Eventually, though, he had to ask something. Is it hard to read that without hands? Morgan spoke, and then instantly wished he could take the words back, feeling like the biggest idiot in the world. The Camerconda looked up, the aperture of its eye narrowing slightly as it focused on him. Yes, it said, digital voice coming out of the speakers it wore on its sides. Not made for us. The fact that it just took the question at face value made Morgan feel a little better. He was trying to figure out how to ask if it would rather have a better tablet or hands when a bunch of other laughing humans drew his attention to the hallway into the rest of the lair. 4 people, all of them looking a little out of breath, like they'd just been for a jog, made their way back into the room, laughing and chatting. They reclaimed a nearby table that had coats and half-eaten food on it, with a couple of them glancing over at Morgan. In fact, he noticed, they did exactly the same thing the Camercondas did. Okay. He leaned forward and quietly spoke to the snake he'd been sharing a table with, trying not to be noticed by the others. I get why you guys do the glancing thing. Why are they looking at me strangely? The Camerconda looked up from its reading and pivoted its head in a wide arc to take in the table next to them. Ah, it said. Those are new. So am I, though, Morgan protested. Those not know. Also, those are very... The Camerconda paused before settling on a word it had chosen for the occasion. Excitable. The way it emphasized the word with reverb made Morgan crack a small smile. Then the camera nudged aside its tablet and looked back at him. I am Color of Dawn, it said. Morgan nodded, before the manners his mom had drilled into him for 15 years took effect. Oh, I'm Morgan. Nice to meet you. He said it almost automatically, and extended a hand to shake on autopilot. Color of Dawn looked down at the offered hand, and Morgan's eyes followed. He pulled back, blushing a furious red as he stammered out an excuse. You already know. I have 0 hands, the Camerconda said. I'm sorry. Morgan dropped his head to the table and tried to burrow into the sleeves of his shirt. Not mad, Color of Dawn replied. Amuse. Morgan peeked up, keeping his head on the table. It was difficult for him to tell. The serpent said it was amused, but it lacked any kind of facial features to read. Unless the head tilt meant something. Still feel bad. I don't want to be, I don't know, a jerk. You are new, the Camerconda nodded in a bobbing motion. You will learn. If I decide to stay, Morgan added, giving voice to his own internal questioning. I don't know if I can be here, I guess. Understand, Color of Dawn told him. The Camerconda had set aside its reading entirely and was now focused on their conversation, though it took a moment to flip another carrot into its mouth and crunch down on it. Morgan saw rows of fangs made of what looked like brass pen tips shredding the vegetable. Really? You seem kind of at home. I mean, this is your home, right? He asked, curiosity getting the better of him. Color of Dawn made a waving motion with its head, and Morgan got the impression it was shrugging. New here, new everywhere. It turned the volume of its voice down, and the lower tone sounded sad in contrast. Could leave, but where? Here is home, but didn't choose. Oh, Morgan said. I guess I understand. James sort of explained what happened to you. He tried not to pick at anything that was too uncomfortable. I guess you really can't leave, huh? Could leave. Somehow Color of Dawn infused its voice with indignation just by turning the volume back up. Like it here, but unsure. It's got good food, Morgan admitted. And everyone is... kind, the Camerconda finished. But... Yeah. Morgan realized he'd opened up to one of the creatures that he'd been afraid of an hour ago, almost without thinking about it. And beyond that, felt like he actually understood Color of Dawn, and was understood by it in turn, more than any of the humans that he'd talked to in the last day. He finished his eggs, while the Camerconda went back to its reading, and the two of them fell into a more comfortable silence. Daniel! James cheerfully answered his cell phone. How you been? How's your camping trip? There was a moment of dead air in reply. What? Daniel's voice came back with confusion so thick even the bad audio quality on James's new phone picked it up. You're on vacation, right? James asked, momentum faltering. No? Daniel's voice was uncertain. I went camping last month, though. Is that what you're thinking of? Probably, James replied, now confident that he wasn't just imagining things. What's up? Officium Mundi agents, Daniel said, and James felt his heart rate spike as Daniel spoke. A lot of them, this time, and, you'll like this, Tyrone is pretty sure he got the breach point down, so that's cool. No, not cool, James snapped. What are you talking about, agents? Stuffed shirts? You're just letting them go? Heh, no. Daniel gave a nervous chuckle, and then, after a pause, his tone got apologetic. Oh, right, you were in a coma when we started this. God, I'm sorry. No, we figured out what cars are dungeon constructs and put GPS trackers in them. Fuck, my bad. I didn't mean to panic you. We know where they are. Okay, James said, already heading to the elevator to the basement that housed their armory. And what about if they're out here to kill people? He demanded. Officium Mundi, that magical existence beyond the stairwell doors in an otherwise normal office building that the Order explored and exploited for powers beyond mortal ability, was, sadly, not stupid. Or if it was stupid, it was stupid on a different scale than human stupidity. It had access to a lot of information that it maybe otherwise shouldn't, like when it tried to intercept and kill potential employees of the mundane office building if they happened to be delvers in other dungeons. How could it know that those people were going to be interviewed, or had exposure to other dungeons in the first place? Where did it get its intel from? Regardless of how it knew the things it knew, though, it was actually quite possibly their best source of new knowledge, because the last time it had tried to kill someone, it led the Order directly to the Akashic Sewer, and after that things had gotten weird. Which didn't detract from the very important point that the office dungeon sometimes tried to assassinate people, which was more what James had challenged Daniel on. I know it might be a problem, Daniel responded, indignant. That's why I called you. You're the person to call, right? Like you can stop them. James sighed as the elevator doors opened. We can do what we do best, he said. Call Harvey, get him in the loop. I'm going through a tunnel, he said as he stepped in and jammed the button for the basement with his elbow. What does... was about all that Daniel got out before the elevator got him far enough underground that the call dropped. James shook his head as he half-jogged through the hallway, dodging around camera condas and research staff until he made his way to the vault. At some point, he realized as he opened the biometric locks, they needed to get more space down here. An extra basement would be nice, or maybe just excavate out into the surrounding reality, assuming they could avoid hitting sewer mains. Because having the vault be a combination magic item containment zone, camera conda ritual area, memorial wall, and armory was sort of asking a lot. Watcher, he nodded politely to the camera conda on her eternal vigil. How are you? We are well, the camera conda spoke back, digital voice kept flat. She didn't talk as much as the others did, and didn't have the same patience for socializing. We await the arrival. Of Morgan? James asked as he opened a padlock on a locker, one of a dozen set in two facing rows in the corner of the increasingly crowded vault. I don't know how he's doing. I haven't checked on him today. Give him some time, okay? He said as he pulled out a .308 marksman rifle, and after he checked it and slung the strap from that over his shoulder, added a case full of the improvised thermite bombs the Order still made frequent use of. Though case in this instance was just the best term James had to describe what was essentially a fancy version of one of those fast food drink carriers, only full of fire grenades. If there was one thing he'd learned, it was that paper pushers, creatures made of literal paper, no matter how irrationally strong they were, still caught fire. We can wait, the priestess replied to James as he added a side holster with a 9mm pistol and then a handful of telepads to various coat pockets as he headed back for the cracked vault door. We are very good at waiting. We'll fix that eventually, James called back as he turned to leave. He lurched slightly as he was about to let the door seal itself shut behind him and caught the handle, holding it open for the cluster of Order members currently moving around the edge of the research space toward him. What's up? He asked Simon as the young man jogged up and took the door from him. Harvey's coordinating upstairs on the shirts. Go, one of them just stopped. The dual-minded young man jerked his head at James. James didn't bother to run all the way back to the elevator. He just pulled one of the telepads out, twirling a pen in his fingers as he wrote down Order of Endless Rooms, Lair, Cafeteria, and then tore the page. He arrived boots first on the table between Morgan and Color of Dawn, eliciting a startled scream from the human teenager and a high-volume electric "Why?" from the cameraconda. James didn't waste time on an explanation, though, instead hopping to the floor and bolting through the open door to the side office that had become home for Response. James had been in here before. Hell, he'd helped set the place up. His role as IT, it seemed, would never truly be gone from him. But still, it was one thing to install cabling and set up monitors, and another entirely to step into a command and control array for a combat operation. The far wall was just screens. The main one currently was showing a map with the GPS positions of the tracked cars. 6 of them, all spreading out from the point on the map that James recognized as his old workplace. Small secondary monitors were showing what looked like feeds from traffic cameras. One of them had the Order's discussion server up on it, and to the side, a pair of stacked screens were divided into views of this exact room from a low angle. Body cameras. James spotted them lined up on a filing cabinet under the desk. The rest of the room was taken up by racks of body armor and light armaments, as well as tools to solve potential problems. Restraints, rebreathers, first aid kits, drone loadouts, the things they discovered response teams needed often enough to justify having them immediately on hand. And then there was the open space on the floor, kept intentionally clear and marked off with duct tape in a deliberate pattern. A telepad arrival point. There is a similar marker concealed in the upper floors of 2 hospitals nearby, and James was quite proud of having made arrangements to keep those there. Harvey was here, running dark-skinned hands through darker hair as he kept an eye on the movements of their quarry, the headset he was wearing making the motion tricky. Harvey was almost always here lately, it seemed. The response teams weren't his idea, but as soon as the project had gotten rolling, he'd found a passion for it that had eclipsed anyone else's. He pulled 12-hour shifts alert on the phones, just in case someone called. He sortied out with teams at least every other day, and he made calls to hospitals and fire departments in small towns across multiple countries, working to build a protocol for the Order's future helping people. His job, well, at first it may have involved a lot of relaxing and watching YouTube, had picked up quite a lot. Some people were noticing that the number that the Order quietly passed around was real, that you could, if you needed help, call. It hadn't made it onto the news, it hadn't made it onto the internet, they hadn't been contacted by any government, but a lot more people were aware of them than before. They probably needed to hire more, James realized, and they needed to do it quickly. James, Harvey's voice snapped him out of his thoughts, his enhanced brain easily filing the reminder away for later. One of them just stopped. Address. Harvey pointed to a monitor where he'd pulled up big bold text of a point on the map. James found a clear spot on the desk and started scrawling it onto a telepad with a hand he didn't realize had already started shaking. You'll be okay, Harvey told him. Just take him out and come back. We can scoop the area later. Scoop? James let out a nervous laugh that was almost a giggle. It's what the kids say, Harvey informed him, and he did it with such a straight face that James wasn't sure if their dispatcher was lying to him. Harvey was just like that. He'd laugh at jokes, but it was hard to tell if he ever made any. James just shrugged and stepped back, rolling his shoulder to adjust the strap of the rifle he was wearing. He made to tear the telepad, but just before he did so, a hand landed on his arm. He turned and saw Anesh standing next to him, his boyfriend wearing one of the status quo bracers, along with the garishly unmatching glove. A compact headset sat over one ear, with the cord trailing down to his phone. Anesh plucked the case of grenades away from James and met his boyfriend's lips for a quick kiss before both of them squared their stances up and James did finally pull the page off. In the response office, Harvey rolled his chair over to a specific keyboard and checked to make sure the call had connected. Comms check, he spoke, and a second later heard Anesh reply on the other end. All right, next team's going out now, Harvey told him as he glanced over his shoulder at where Simon, Deb, and Frequency of Sunlight had just come in and were copying down the second address on the screen that he pointed them to. Good hunting. He turned around in his chair and repeated himself again. Take out the target, then return. We'll scoop the area later. Scoop? frequency of sunlight asked, her shaky motions smoothing out a bit as she spoke, letting Deb rest a hand on her head for the impending teleport. It's what the kids say, Harvey informed her. That can't be true. Team 2 is away, Harvey reported to Anesh as they vanished, spinning around in his chair again. Team 2, comms check. Okay, good hunting. They go out to fight, to save others, Color of Dawn was telling Morgan. The two of them have moved out to the back patio behind the kitchen, where Morgan was smoking a stolen cigarette that he'd gotten off of Nate. Neither of them wanted to stick around a place where members of the Order were teleporting in and falling out of the sky onto their table. Sounds kind of self-righteous. Morgan's reply was bitter as he leaned back and puffed a cloud of acrid smoke into the air. Is bad? The Camerconda asked. Morgan shrugged. I don't know. People like that always think they know what's best. It can get stupid. Color of Dawn hissed. Better to have others tell you of righteousness, it asked. It took Morgan a minute to puzzle through the statement, but he was quickly learning that one of the perks of talking to a Camerconda was that they had no expectation of instant replies. He was almost expected to take his time and think about stuff. It was a hard habit to break, especially for a teenager, but he found it was kind of nice. Fair point, he eventually conceded. They just seem really political here. Meaningless word, Color of Dawn hissed. What, political? Yes. The Camerconda's artificial voice sounded almost spiteful. Every definition, different. Every conversation, every person, their politics normal, others not. Ah, like people think that they're normal? Morgan asked. Wait, that happens here? Not here, Color of Dawn shook its head. Internet, Reddit. I feel like you're a new person, right? Like, hold on, how old are you? New, not child. You? Same, I guess. Morgan flicked ash off of his cigarette. I guess I was going to say you probably shouldn't be online, but maybe no one should, huh? But yeah, so they go fight people? Fight monsters, the Camerconda corrected. Hard to be people. Most life isn't. Almost no puppets are. The human shook his head. How do you pronounce the capital letters that way? I heard James do it earlier. Learned from him. Not sure where he learned. Color of Dawn cracked its maw in a grin. Clever trick. But yes, they fight. Keep people safe. They are good, self-righteous or not. Morgan looked over at his new friend. Do you fight? He asked quietly. The response didn't come for a long time. No, Color of Dawn finally said. Is it okay if I ask why? Morgan said, dropping his used butt into the tin of discarded smokes that Nate was collecting out here. But like, only if... I'm not enough, Color of Dawn told him, and then, a minute of quiet later, good enough, brave enough, faithful enough, not I. The digital voice seemed to resonate with a vibrant sorrow. Is that why you don't care about talking to me? Morgan asked. Like, everyone else like you keeps staring or looking like they want something from me, but you don't. Not believe me. Color of Dawn nodded, a bobbing motion. Its tongue flicked out to taste the cool afternoon air. Not good enough to believe. Believe in what? Morgan asked. The Camerconda looked over, lens of an eye widening and narrowing in short bursts of motion as it focused on his face. In her, in you, in them, I am not worth believing. Not good enough. Morgan licked his lips as he gave an open-mouthed stare at the snake next to him. Wait, your religion is... you have to be good enough to join? Or think you're good enough? That's... He was going to say weird, but that would be rude. And for a second, he remembered that the thing he was sitting on a carved wooden bench next to was one of the things that killed his mother. But then the feeling passed, and his heart didn't start hammering in panic this time. What makes you not good enough? He asked. That not ask, Color of Dawn said. Later. Maybe. Later. Do most of you, like you snake people do they actually worship my mom? Morgan asked quietly, trying to change the subject at least a little bit. They do, Color of Dawn replied, voice a little less loud, perhaps relieved it wouldn't be pressed for answers. Why? She freed us. But you killed her. Morgan's voice cracked on the last word, an accusation hanging heavy in the air. Color of Dawn looked away, staring out over the top of the fence that separated the patio from the parking lot. Yes, it said. We'll never make it up. That's why they help people? To, what, apologize? No, maybe. The Order saved us. We're kind. If us kind too. No, no words. No words for this. Color of Dawn shook its head, almost frantically. Morgan held up his hands, trying to calm the Camerconda down. It's fine, it's okay. I think I get it. It's like you pay it forward, right? Pay forward? The digitized voice asked. Yeah, an organic one replied. Like, someone did something good for you. You can't really repay them, but you can do it again for someone else, and then they'll do it to somebody else. Everyone you help, it adds up. It's a big chain, right? Morgan winced. Maybe I don't have the words for this either, he muttered, feeling like he had just said something that was kind of stupid. But the Camerconda took to it instantly. The chain of kind, yes. Color of Dawn bobbed enthusiastically. They add to it. Then the enthusiasm faded a bit and it glanced away again. They do. I not. You don't have to fight monsters to be a nice person, dude, Morgan told it, suddenly invested more than he expected to ever be in the emotional well-being of the biomechanical serpent. Just, like, be good. It's okay. I know my mom... He stopped talking, his jaw clenched as he ground his teeth together, but then he steadied himself, took a breath, and kept going. My mom never expected me to be the best or anything, but she always told me I had to try, like whatever I was doing, even when she caught me skipping class. He grinned, the smile coming from a small, silent sob of a memory. She caught me skipping class, and told me I better not get caught next time. I think it would have been different, like if I was hurting anyone, but I wasn't, and she didn't care that I was breaking the rules, just that I do my best. Color of Dawn mused next to him. Are you? Your best? Nah, Morgan said, wishing that he'd swiped more smokes from Nate. But fuck it, it's never too late to try, right? The Camerconda nodded back at him, slowly at first, and then more vigorously. Hey, do you think you can show me where my mom is? Not, like, I don't want to see her, yet. I just want to know... Yes, Color of Dawn told him simply. Follow. Inside. Less cold. Yeah, this state's winter sucks, Morgan agreed, rubbing at his ears as they made their way back into the kitchen. James and Anesh appeared on the fourth floor of a parking garage. It took the two a few seconds to get their bearings, James whipping his head around to spot their targets, but aside from a concrete structure about a third full of cars, they were alone. You go up. I'll go down, Anesh nudged him. He nodded, got a firm grip on his rifle, and started moving, splitting off from his boyfriend as they went in opposite directions, circling through the parking lot's corkscrew aisle. James lost sight of Anesh quickly, but he didn't panic. His partner was just as experienced at this as he was. Even though just as experienced in hunting down rogue agents of a hostile dimension in a parking garage meant not that experienced, they were both armed, and this time they were the ambushing party. 2 floors of parking structure later, James had seen no signs of the suits. However, he had passed by a woman pushing a stroller, and despite the mask covering her features, he was pretty sure she had a panicked expression on. As he looped around the top floor and made his way to the elevator, he saw her fumbling a cell phone out from down the main ramp. "I've been spotted. Civilian calling police, probably," James messaged back to Harvey, knowing that would be passed along to Anesh. "Ground floor, contact," Harvey texted back as James boarded the second elevator of the day and rode it down, adjusting his grip on the rifle and making sure the safety was off as the doors slid open. From his vantage point, he was perfectly positioned to see Anesh sail through the air perpendicular to the elevator's door, just as those doors slid open. His boyfriend's arms and legs outstretched as he hammered into a concrete wall and rolled to the ground. James stepped out, noting the presence of both paper pushers advancing on Anesh with their backs to him, and a cluster of teenagers around a white van nearby. They were cowering, possibly because there was a puddle of fire covering the main aisle nearby, a reminder of the point where Anesh had lobbed thermite before James had arrived. James lined up his first shot and blew away the midsection of a paper pusher before they even knew he was there. The .308 round, designed to penetrate flesh, easily carving through cardstock skin and shredding the body with a rippling shockwave. The other entity turned toward him and ducked the second bullet as James started lining up shots and pulling the trigger in rapid succession, heavy booms from the rifle deafening everyone in the parking structure. It started moving toward him then. He caught it in the arm, but it just grabbed its own limb out of the air and reattached it, the uncanny valley face showing something just a little too unfamiliar to be recognized as real anger. He tried to keep it from closing in, feet steady as he sidestepped to the right, putting distance between them, but these things were far too fast to avoid by backpedaling while still trying to aim a gun. And even with his boosted aim stat, it was almost on him. Then the grenade Anesh threw from the side detonated in mid-air, spraying streamers of metallic sparks across the paper pusher's face and torso. It caught instantly and screamed in an animalistic way as its paper form was quickly reduced to ash. Then there was silence, except for the ringing in everyone's ears, and the distant sirens, and the crackle of the thermite. "Was it after any of you?" James yelled at the teenagers, who probably hoped he hadn't seen them. After all, crazy people with guns were, well, crazy, and nobody really wanted to be noticed by them. One of them stood up, though, trembling legs pushing her off the floor. "Me," the girl said. "Don't hurt them. They don't know." James rolled his eyes and advanced on her, although slowly, slinging the gun back to his side and making sure the safety was engaged. "Our card," he said, offering her a slip of paper. "Give us a call when you're ready, or if you ever need help again, okay?" Behind him, staggering to his side, Anesh was shoving the two recovered baseball-sized green orbs into his pockets. "Police are here," he said, and winced as James clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Bloody hell! Ow!" he exclaimed. "Not so hard!" "That wasn't what you were saying last—" The two of them were gone then, teleported away before anybody could hear the end of that sentence, and the only things left in the parking structure were some very confused teenagers and a very small bonfire.